No warnings, just karma.
My father paid my fiancé $50,000 to leave me and marry my cousin instead. I found out at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, and in the 3 seconds it took me to read that email, the life I thought I was living quietly collapsed. I had been working late in my apartment, finishing a quarterly report for the accounting firm where I worked. Numbers had always made sense to me. Numbers followed rules. Numbers didn't lie. James, my fiancé of 4 years, had texted earlier saying he was staying at his place because of an early morning meeting. We were 6 months away from our wedding. Invitations were already ordered. My dress hung in my closet wrapped in protective plastic like a promise waiting for its moment. I reached for my phone to set an alarm and noticed James's laptop on the coffee table. He had forgotten it the night before. The screen was still faintly glowing. I wasn't snooping. I never snooped. But the email notification at the top of the screen stopped my hand midair. The sender's name was my father. Subject line: Ray, our arrangement. My pulse thudded in my ears as I clicked it. James, I've transferred the remaining $25,000 as discussed. That brings the total to $50,000. I know this isn't easy, but Mia can give you the life Sarah simply can't. Her family's marketing connections will advance your career faster than my daughter ever could. Mia's trust fund alone is worth more than Sarah will make in her lifetime. You're making the smart choice. When you break the engagement, keep it clean. Don't mention our conversations. Sarah doesn't need to know. She'll move on, she always does what's practical. Below it was James's reply from 3 hours earlier. I understand, Mr. Richardson. I care about Sarah, but you're right about the opportunities with Mia. I'll end things this weekend. Thank you for helping me see clearly. The money will help me start fresh. I read it once, twice, then again until the words blurred and rearranged themselves into something almost unreal. My father had paid the man I was about to marry to leave me for my cousin. Mia, beautiful, glowing, effortless Mia with her lifestyle Instagram and inherited ease. We had grown up together. Shared clothes, secrets, birthdays, summers. She was supposed to stand beside me in a bridesmaid dress while I promised forever to a man who had already sold our future. The room felt like it tilted. I gripped the couch to steady myself, air scraping painfully into my lungs. 4 years. 4 years of love, compromise, shared grocery lists, whispered dreams at 2 a.m. 4 years of Sunday dinners at my parents' house where my father clapped James on the back and called him son. Every memory suddenly had a price tag. I sat there until dawn, my work laptop forgotten, spreadsheets glowing uselessly in the dark. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the quiet voice in my head that sounded exactly like my father. She always does what's practical. He knew I wouldn't scream. He knew I wouldn't cause a scene. He knew I would swallow the hurt and adjust, the way I always had. The way I had adjusted to Mia being the pretty one, the exciting one, the one everyone gravitated toward. The way I had adjusted to being dependable, serious, the girl who stayed late at work while everyone else went out. I looked down at my engagement ring. James had proposed on a beach in Santa Monica at sunset. He had cried. I had cried. My mother had cried when I called her. My father had shaken James's hand like a deal had just been sealed. Maybe it had. I could have confronted them. I could have sent screenshots to the entire family. I could have shown up at Sunday dinner and shattered every plate in the house. Instead, as the sun rose and painted my living room gold, I made a different decision. I would not beg to be chosen. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I called my landlord to ask about breaking my lease. Then I called a lawyer to ask very calm questions about shared assets, deposits, and my legal exposure if a wedding was cancelled. By the time James texted asking if we could get dinner that weekend, I already had a plan. We met at our usual Italian restaurant. Candlelight, soft music. The place where he'd once told me he wanted 2 kids and a dog and a house with a garden. He was fidgeting with his napkin, rehearsing a breakup speech he thought would destroy me. Sarah, he began gently, I've been thinking about us. It's okay, I said, my voice steady as glass. I know. His face drained of color. You know. I know you're going to end our engagement. And honestly, James, I've been feeling it too. We've grown apart, we want different things. The lie slid out effortlessly. I watched relief flood his features, watched guilt shrink into something manageable, convenient. You're being so understanding, he said, reaching for my hand. I moved it away. I want you to be happy, I continued. You should be with someone who fits your ambitions, someone who can give you the life you want. His eyes flickered just for a second. Recognition. My father's words echoed back at him and he didn't even realize it. You deserve someone who appreciates you, he said. Yes, I replied softly, I do. I took off my ring and placed it on the table between us. 4 years reduced to a circle of metal and stone. Keep it, I said, sell it, start fresh. I walked out before he could thank me for making it easy. I didn't cry until I got home. Then I cried for 3 hours straight, the kind of crying that empties you out until there's nothing left but a raw, quiet resolve. When the tears stopped, I made myself a promise. No one would ever again decide my worth for me. 2 weeks later, I was on a one-way flight to Singapore with 2 suitcases, a carry-on, and a version of myself I barely recognized. 6 months earlier, the CEO of a fast-growing fintech startup had tried to recruit me as a senior accountant. I had turned her down because I was planning a wedding, because James didn't want to move, because it wasn't practical. Practical had cost me 4 years and a fiancé who could be bought. So I called her back. I'm still interested, I said. She didn't ask why the sudden change. She just replied, good, I like people who know when it's time to move. Singapore hit me like a wave. Heat wrapped around me the moment I stepped out of the airport. The city was loud, fast, layered with languages and ambition. No one knew me. No one knew my father. No one knew about the wedding that never happened. I threw myself into work like it was oxygen. The company was small but electric. We were building financial tools for people traditional banks ignored, street vendors, small shop owners, migrant workers sending money home, real impact, real numbers, real growth. Rachel Chen, the CEO, was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. She demanded precision, speed, accountability. She didn't care that I had just moved countries, or that I was rebuilding my life from emotional rubble. Can you do it? She asked. Yes, I said. Good, then do it. For the first time, my competence wasn't a quiet trait in the background of someone else's story. It was the reason I was in the room. 6 months in, she promoted me to financial controller. A year later, I was CFO. By the 2nd year, we were preparing for an IPO. I worked 100-hour weeks without resentment. I learned Mandarin badly but enthusiastically. I sat in boardrooms with investors who tested me with sharp questions, and I answered without shrinking. Every time I signed a document worth millions, a small voice inside me whispered, $50,000. That was the number my father had used to measure my future. I made that in less than a month now. My apartment was small but modern, high above the city. At night the skyline glittered like a circuit board. I filled the space with things I chose myself, art that didn't match anyone else's taste, books stacked everywhere, plants I somehow kept alive. I learned how to be alone without feeling abandoned. I joined a yoga class where no one asked about my past. I made friends who knew me as Sarah the finance nerd who ordered too much spicy food and laughed too loudly after 2 glasses of wine. I built a life that didn't have space for ghosts. My family became background noise. I called my mother on her birthday. I texted my brother when he got promoted. I kept conversations light and carefully surface level. I never mentioned the email. 3 years passed before my old life forced its way back in. The message came from my brother Michael. I'm getting married, I know we've been distant but you're my sister, I can't do this without you. The wedding's in Portland in 3 months, please come. I stared at the screen for a long time. Michael had been my shadow growing up, the kid who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who asked me how to talk to girls, the only person in that house who had ever looked at me like I was extraordinary without needing proof. I couldn't miss his wedding. I called him. His face appeared on my screen, older, broader, but still my little brother. You'll come, he asked. I'll come, I said, on one condition. Anything. I'm bringing someone. The words surprised both of us. His eyes widened. You're seeing someone, Sarah, that's amazing. His name was Daniel. Daniel Park, venture capitalist. Smart mouth. Sharp mind. We had met at a conference in Tokyo over burnt coffee and mutual irritation at a keynote speaker who used the word synergy 17 times in 10 minutes. He didn't need to be impressed by me. He was already successful. He didn't need me to be smaller so he could feel bigger. When we disagreed, it felt like sparring, not shrinking. When I called him that night, he picked up on the second ring. "How do you feel about emotional warfare disguised as a wedding?" I asked. "Details," he said calmly. "My ex-fiancé married my cousin. My father secretly paid him to leave me. I found out by accident. I moved to another continent. Now my brother's getting married and everyone will be there." A pause. "Okay," he said, "now I'm definitely coming." The flight to Portland felt heavier than any intercontinental business trip. Daniel slept beside me, his hand loosely wrapped around mine. I watched clouds roll beneath us and wondered if I had truly moved on or just built a very successful wall. Michael picked us up from the airport. He hugged me so tight my feet left the ground. "You're really here," he kept saying. "I am. Mom's been cooking for 2 days. Dad's pretending he's not emotional, but he is. And Mia and James will be there too." I nodded. "It's your wedding, invite who you want." The rehearsal dinner was at a restaurant downtown. Warm lights, polished glasses, soft music. I chose a navy dress that made me feel like myself, confident, composed, untouchable. When we walked in, the room shifted. My mother saw me first. She gasped, rushed over, and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like home and regret. My father stood more slowly. Older, greyer, he shook Daniel's hand, assessing him the way men like him always do. Then I saw Mia. Her smile was bright but strained, like it hurt to hold. James stood beside her, broader, duller somehow, eyes that slid away from mine like I was a mirror he didn't want to look into. "Sarah," Mia said, voice too high. "Wow, you look incredible." "Hi, Mia." "Hi, James." "Good to see you," he muttered. Dinner was a performance. Questions about Singapore, about my job, about Daniel. "So what do you do?" my father asked him. "I run a venture capital firm," Daniel said easily. "We invest in fintech and sustainable tech across Asia Pacific." "That must be very profitable." "Sometimes," Daniel replied. "But Sarah's company went public last year. She's done exceptionally well." Silence fell over the table like a dropped curtain. "You went public?" my father asked me. "Yes," I said. "We rang the bell in June." "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked. "Because you didn't think I was worth betting on." "It all happened fast," I said instead. Mia's smile faltered. James stared into his wine glass like it might swallow him. Later, my father asked to speak to me outside. Cold air, city lights, space thick with everything unsaid. "I owe you an apology," he began. "I didn't help him. I thought I was making the right decision, I thought." "You thought Mia was a better investment," I said quietly, "and James was an asset to be redirected." He flinched. "You saw the emails?" "Yes." "Did Mia know?" "No," he said quickly, "she didn't." "So you manipulated both of us." "I was trying to help." "You put a price on me," I said, $50,000. His face crumpled in a way I had never seen before. "I was wrong," he said. "I didn't see your potential." "I shouldn't have needed you to," I replied. Tears burned behind my eyes, but they didn't fall. "You don't get to take credit for what I built without you," I continued. "You don't get to rewrite this as tough love or strategy. You made a choice, and so did I. Can you forgive me?" I held his gaze. "Not today." I went back inside, back to Daniel, back to the life I had chosen. And for the first time since that night in my apartment, I felt something close to peace. But the story between us wasn't finished yet. The wedding day arrived wrapped in pale sunlight and the kind of soft breeze photographers pray for. Michael looked terrified and ecstatic all at once. Emma glowed. Their love was simple, steady, unperformed. Watching them take their vows felt like witnessing something honest being built in real time, not negotiated behind closed doors. I cried during the ceremony, not from sadness, but from the quiet relief of seeing love that didn't come with conditions or contracts. At the reception, I kept my distance from Mia and James. But it was impossible not to notice the cracks. They barely spoke. When they did, it was short, clipped, polite in a way that screamed distance. At one point, Mia stepped outside alone, staring at her phone with a tight jaw. James stayed at the bar too long, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. My father watched all of it. So did I. Karma didn't need my help. It had been doing its job just fine. Later in the evening, Emma tossed the bouquet. I hadn't planned to stand with the other women, but someone pulled me into the group. The flowers flew through the air in a perfect arc and landed straight in my hands. The room erupted in cheers. I laughed, genuinely surprised, and turned to Daniel. He grinned like he'd just won something. Foreshadowing, he said. Don't you dare, I warned, smiling. But the moment shifted something, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, in a quiet, grounding way. I wasn't the girl left behind anymore. I wasn't the almost bride. I was simply a woman holding flowers at her brother's wedding with a man beside her who chose her without negotiation. After the dancing, after the cake, after the speeches that left half the room in tears, Daniel and I slipped outside for air. You okay? He asked. Better than okay, I said, lighter. Good, he replied, because I need you emotionally stable for what I'm about to do in a few months. I narrowed my eyes. That sounds suspicious. He just smiled. The next morning before our flight back, my father asked if we could talk again. This time, it was in the quiet corner of my mother's kitchen, early light spilling across the table where I had done homework as a child. I've been thinking all night, he said, about what you said, about everything. I stayed silent. I can't undo what I did, but I want to make it right, financially, legally, however I can. There it was, his language, money, structure, transactions. You can't fix betrayal with a check, I said. I know that now, but I also know I treated you unfairly for years, not just with James. I pushed you toward safety, not greatness. I underestimated you, and I put my faith in the wrong people. He slid a folder across the table. I spoke to my attorney, he continued. I've restructured my estate. A significant portion of my business assets will now go to you, not as an apology, as acknowledgement. I didn't touch the folder. Why? I asked. Because you built something real, because you proved I was wrong, and because whether you let me back into your life or not, you are my daughter, I should have acted like it. I finally opened it. Legal documents, trust adjustments, ownership transfers in a commercial property portfolio I didn't even know he had fully paid off, numbers that were large enough to make most people dizzy. 3 years ago, that would have felt like victory. Now it felt like a footnote. I don't need this, I said. I know, he replied quietly, that's why you deserve it. I studied him. The arrogance I had grown up with had worn down into something humbler, older. Regret had carved lines success never could. I'll accept it, I said slowly, but not as a gift, as restitution. He nodded, eyes shining. And understand this, I continued. This doesn't buy you a place in my daily life, it doesn't make us close, it doesn't erase what you did. I understand. You'll have updates, occasional visits, that's it. I'll take what I can get, he said. That was the moment the power shifted completely. Not because of the money. Because I was the one setting the terms. On the plane back to Singapore, Daniel listened quietly as I told him everything. So, he said, your father tried to control your life with money, and now you're the one controlling the legal structure of his legacy. I smiled faintly. Poetic, isn't it? Very, he said, also incredibly hot from a corporate governance perspective. I laughed so hard the flight attendant glanced over. 3 months later, Daniel proposed in Bali at sunset, exactly like he'd hinted. No performance, no crowd, just the ocean, the sky, and a question asked with steady certainty. I said yes. We married 6 months after that in a small ceremony in Singapore. 20 people, no spectacle, just intention. My mother came, crying the entire time. Michael came, beaming. Emma danced barefoot at the reception. My father came too. He sat in the second row, not the first. He didn't give a speech. He didn't try to walk me down the aisle. He shook Daniel's hand and said, "Take care of her," and for once it didn't sound like a transaction. It sounded like a request he knew he had no right to make. Mia sent a message online. "Congratulations, you look happy." I didn't reply. James never reached out again. Years passed. My career expanded across continents. I joined boards, invested in startups led by women who reminded me of a younger version of myself. I built mentorship programs, quietly funded scholarships for girls studying finance. One evening, nearly 7 years after the email that shattered my life, I received a call from my father's lawyer. My father had stepped down from active business leadership. Health reasons. He wanted me to take a formal seat on the family company's board, not as a daughter, but as a voting member with controlling interest. I agreed on one condition: full financial transparency, governance reforms, independent oversight. No backroom deals, no quiet manipulations. He agreed. At the first board meeting, I sat at the head of the table where he used to sit. Executives who had known me as a quiet teenager now addressed me as chairwoman. My father watched not with pride alone but with understanding. He had once tried to trade my future for someone else's convenience. Now I was the one legally protecting hundreds of employees, steering investments, and making decisions that shaped industries. Not because of him. In spite of him. And that was the real justice. The day I signed the final governance reforms into effect, ensuring no single family member could ever again use company funds for personal manipulation, I went home, took off my heels, and sat on my balcony overlooking the Singapore skyline. Daniel handed me a glass of wine. "Thinking about the past?" he asked. "Not really," I said. And for the first time it was true. If this story moved you, if you believe in rising with dignity, in building your own worth, and in winning without becoming cruel, then like, subscribe, and stay for more stories where strength speaks louder than revenge. Power doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in meeting rooms, in signatures, in policies that make sure what happened to you can never happen to someone else again. 6 months into my role on the board, an internal audit team flagged an old discretionary expense from nearly a decade ago. A private transfer, categorized vaguely under strategic consulting. $50,000. I knew that number without looking twice. The audit committee brought it to me because of the new transparency rules I had put in place. Every irregularity now had to be reviewed independently. I sat in a glass conference room, overlooking the city that had rebuilt me, reading the report while the committee waited. "That transaction predates current governance," one member said carefully. "There's no legal requirement to revisit it." "Who approved it?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "My father," the CFO said quietly, "at the time sole signing authority." I nodded once. "Document it," I said. "Reclassify it properly as a personal withdrawal, not a business expense. Update historical records, note governance failure. Include it in the annual ethics review as a legacy case study." They blinked. "You want it on record?" someone asked. "Yes," I replied. "Sunlight is part of accountability." Word reached my father within a day. He called me that evening. "I heard about the audit," he said. "I assumed you would. You're making it public in the ethics report." "Yes." A long pause. "I deserve that," he said finally. That was the difference between the man he had been and the man he was trying to become. Years ago he would have buried it, denied it, spun it into strategy. Now he let the truth stand. That didn't erase the past, but it closed a loop. A month later, Mia called me for the first time in years. I almost didn't answer. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Sarah, I found out," she said. "About what?" "The money. Dad told me everything, about James, about the deal." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the skyline. "I wondered when that conversation would happen," I said. "I feel sick," she whispered. "I thought he chose me, I thought I was enough." I didn't rush to comfort her, but I didn't twist the knife either. "You didn't deserve to be lied to," I said calmly, "but you did choose to stay with someone who treated you badly later." "I know," she said, voice breaking. "We're separating, it's ugly." I closed my eyes briefly, not in pain, in release. "I hope you find something real next time," I told her. Why are you being kind to me? She asked. Because I'm not competing with you anymore. That was the last long conversation we ever had. James tried calling once during their divorce. I didn't answer. He left no voicemail. Some chapters don't need dialogue, they just need distance. Years continued folding forward. Daniel and I built a life that felt earned, not assembled. We argued about travel schedules, not betrayals. We negotiated vacation spots, not self-worth. When our daughter was born, I held her in a hospital room thousands of miles from where my old life had fallen apart and understood something with bone-deep clarity. Cycles only continue if someone doesn't break them. My father met her when she was 6 months old. He didn't hold her like a man entitled to legacy. He held her like someone grateful for a second chance to do better. I won't make the same mistakes, he said quietly. I know, I replied. Not because I trusted blindly. Because I had boundaries strong enough that his mistakes could never again shape my future. On the 10th anniversary of the night I found that email, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even think about James. I signed papers that funded another scholarship program. I chaired a board meeting that approved parental leave expansion. I came home to a husband who asked about my day and meant it. The best justice wasn't watching others fall. It was building a life so solid that no one could ever trade pieces of it behind my back again. And this time, the story didn't end with heartbreak. It ended with ownership. Ownership changed the way I walked into rooms. Not because I needed to prove anything anymore, but because nothing inside me was asking for permission. 3 years after joining the board, I led the company through its most significant transformation in its history. We restructured leadership, expanded internationally, and implemented compliance standards that exceeded regulatory requirements in every region we operated. No shortcuts, no hidden clauses, no quiet favors. During one quarterly review, an external consultant presented a case study on legacy governance failures in family-run corporations. Slide 12 displayed a redacted example of executive misuse of funds for personal influence. $50,000. No names, just facts. A mistake turned into a policy lesson. I watched junior executives in the room take notes. That was the point, not punishment, prevention. After the meeting, my father asked to speak privately. His health had slowed him. Age had gentled the sharp edges that once defined him. I saw the presentation, he said. I know. You turned my worst decision into a safeguard for the future. Yes. He nodded slowly. That's more than I deserved. It's not about what you deserve, I replied. It's about what the company deserves, what the people working here deserve. He studied me for a long moment. You became the leader I thought I was, he said quietly. I didn't smile. I became the leader I needed, I answered. That was the last board meeting he ever attended. He passed away peacefully the following winter. There were no dramatic bedside apologies, no cinematic final speeches. We had already said what needed saying in the years before. Regret had been acknowledged, responsibility had been faced, boundaries had been respected. At the memorial, people spoke about his business acumen, his discipline, his ability to build from nothing. I spoke about accountability. Leadership, I said at the podium, isn't measured by control. It's measured by the systems you leave behind that protect people even when you're not in the room. Some understood the deeper meaning. That was enough. After the estate was settled, I made one final decision. I directed a substantial portion of my inherited shares into a foundation focused on financial education for young women entering male-dominated industries. Not charity, infrastructure, mentorship networks, legal literacy, contract negotiation training. No one would ever sit across from a polished table again, unaware of the power structures shaping their future. Not if I could help it. Years later, at a conference in London, a young founder approached me after a panel. You don't know me, she said nervously, but your foundation funded my legal advisory program when I started my company. I kept full ownership because of that. I shook her hand. That's the goal, I said. That night, back in my hotel room, I thought briefly about the girl sitting on her apartment floor at 2 a.m. staring at an email that felt like the end of everything. She thought she had been abandoned. She had actually been released. The difference just took time to see. Daniel found me by the window, city lights stretching endlessly below. "Where'd you go just now?" he asked. "Nowhere painful," I said, "just perspective." He wrapped an arm around me. "You built something that outlived the hurt," he said. I leaned into him, watching reflections of glass towers shimmer like constellations. "No," I replied softly, "I built something that made the hurt irrelevant." And that was the final form of justice. Not revenge. Not victory over someone else. Authority over my own story. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps more stories about strength, respect, and knowing your value reach the people who need them.